What's up, everybody? This is Rome is Burning. I'm your best friend Rick. We got Sean over here. We got Vic, and we got our good friend Jay Dyer, friend of the show.
What's up?
Just sitting here to dab on pagans tonight, and race idolaters, and and on atheists in religious clothing. I guess you could describe them as.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, before we begin, I just want to tell you, Jay, thanks for joining us. And
thank you, guys.
We all have been following everything you do. RIB's audience is your audience, and you are prolific. I mean, you must be putting in 80, 90 hours a freaking week, podcasts and the things that you're writing. I just want to say from all of us, thanks for all your hard work. I mean, it pays off. I've been the reason I know this is because I've been a subscriber for 2 years now or so. And what is this, like $5 a month? Just on a basic silver level, which is ridiculous. It should be more than that because there's never an ending to all the stuff that you have on there. And it saved me so much time and so many resources, hundreds of hours of research, And you think it'll keep it at $5 a month? I mean, it just seems a little low.
Squeeze these guys, Jay.
Well, thanks, dude. I appreciate it. That's a great selling point. And it's kind of too late to raise the price or anything. I wouldn't do that. But when I made the prices, I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't think I would, really be able to make a living from it. But that's what it came to. So thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And
I do have a confession to make.
Glad I can help stuff.
I do have a confession to make, bro. I've been on the road for about a year now. I finally settled down. I got a flat screen TV, and I do have a confession to make. I have not bought your first book. You have a second book coming out, because I want to do the thing. I think it's kind of promoted on Boiler Room. I've heard it a couple of times where you read the book, but you watch the movies while you read the book. So
some people have done that. Yeah.
Oh man.
So I got my flat screen TV out. I got everything ready to go. Can I still get like an autographed copy of the original book from you, like straight from the guy?
I mail them every week. Yeah.
Yeah. So email you, and you can do it. Does it cost?
Well, there's a shop. There's a shop at the website. There's a shop section where you can buy.
Can I do like a special one, like for a gift? Like, let's say if I wanted to buy one for a friend, could you write like, "Dear Rick, you're a huge flaming queer ball." Okay, is that a possibility to do that?
Actually, go for my priest.
Like
that's how I autograph most copies. So
okay.
Absolutely.
How about like Rick? I heard you give hand jobs to the CIA for foundation money under the bridge. Is that a possibility? Could you do that?
I'm trying to get
how much?
So in other words, I should congratulate Rick on going to work at Fordham and Public Orthodoxy, right?
Guys, I'm just trying to get that sweet spot on Ancient Faith. Okay, I mean, please give me a break.
Hey Vic,
try to get Robert's Burning on Ancient Faith Radio here.
For real though, I'm going to buy you both a copy of Jay's book, and it is going to be personally autographed for you guys, just for this whole occasion. So,
thanks, dude. I'm humbled. I'm honored. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Well, anyway, guys, it's been a great stream. Good night.
So we had about a 4-minute commercial for bullshit there, and we'll call it a night. Make some mammon and call it a night.
Good boy. All right, guys. So, how did this start? This started a while back when what's her face, Carolyn Emmerich on Twitter.
That was her name.
She always changed her name, like Caroline. So it's like she separates like two different words, like Carol / line, or like with a K sometimes, or with a Y. But her name's Carolyn.
Boomer pagan. She looks like a boomer pagan.
Yeah. She's trying to hide her age very, very obviously. And she wrote this article. It was right around Easter. And it was like, who's trying to say like, it's Ostara, the goddess of the harvest.
Oh, she wrote that stupid article. Is that the one that Richard shared?
Bro, that embarrassing ass article. It's like, look at this Coca-Cola advertisement.
Oh, I didn't realize she wrote that. Okay.
Oh, dude, it was so embarrassing. I was like, this is awful. And I tweeted a bunch of times. That was like what, 2 bands ago. on Twitter. I was tweeting at Spencer. I was like, Spencer, how could you? I mean, I know you're a pathetic bastard, but like this article is extra pathetic. You can't put this out. This is awful and stupid and embarrassing. But you know, he put it out because he doesn't really give a shit about anything. So that's what. And she comes out. I heard like one episode of her show here on YouTube, where she had on Joseph Atwell, who I'm sure was I'm sure Atwell was super busy and had a bunch of other things to do. You know, because he's such a that's sarcasm, by the way. He doesn't have anything to fucking do, so get on some crazy woman's podcast. And shilling his stupid, like repeatedly debunked book, Siege's Messiah.
Yeah, he asked me to do a debate again the other day too. By the way,
Who Atwell?
Yeah, he's asked multiple times why I won't debate him. Which I'm sure he thinks that it's fear, but no, it's more so a question.
Your pearls, Jay.
You have to sift, wheat from chaff. What profitable arguments are there? Who you want to give a platform to? Who you don't? You know what I mean?
Look, 10 seconds of Googling wrecks this dude. Okay, I mean, just like the singular argument that Christianity existed before Josephus' histories were written or were out.
Mm-hmm.
That alone destroys the entirety of his freaking thesis. But he has no answer for this. But parallels, these weird, wacky parallels that he wants to draw. But he kind of like it's okay. You know what it feels like reading his parallels that he says are there. Like, okay, there's a part where there's guys in the river, so the Romans are stabbing the dudes in the river, and like, oh, it's fishers of men. Get it? That's the joke. He put in the thing.
Wow.
There's this woman who eats her baby. Like, oh, get it? That's the Last Supper. Get it? And he's like one giant troll. And you know what? It feels kind of like remember back in like the 90s when the people were playing the Wizard of Oz and the Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon at the same time. And they're like, look at the parallels. Look at the parallels, dude.
Yeah.
Like, they're not really there. You're just like reading it into there. I think this is and this is something that I've kind of thought and really I come to this conclusion from both arguing and watching people argue with atheists for years at this point.
My take
is
on that.
I'm sorry, so I'm gonna just finish my sentence here.
Yeah.
Is that at the core of it, he was just looking for a reason to apostatize, because at the core of atheism is emotional reasons, not intellectual reasons. Carolyn Emmerich recently tweeted out something that she was like, I blame Christianity for my parents divorcing. Like, okay, this is clearly an emotional problem. You're angry at the world and you blame God, and so you lash out, and this is sad.
I've even been in conversations with a lot of atheists and former Christians who will admit that. They'll even say at times, look, it's not an intellectual problem with me. I just hate the idea of this God. I'm mad at this God. I don't want this to be true. It really doesn't have anything to do with the intellectual stuff. And a lot of times, you're absolutely right. That's a cloak for the real issue, which is usually moral.
Yeah, it's absurd.
And I would also add that it's the difficulty for most people about the Gospels is that it is the most esoteric work that's ever been created. That's why, like, the Orthodox Church doesn't believe in esoteric groups or anything like that, because it is the ultimate esoteric work. I mean, it is from God. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, you can take all of these things and you could try to shape them into everything you want to make them from the past, because everything again, the Gospels are a presupposition to everything that we know. So everything is through the focus of the Gospels. This is difficult for people to understand. So yeah, you can make these parallels, but these parallels were only an inversion of the original idea behind the Gospels that God has always put there, and that people kind of slowly kind of grasp onto a little bit throughout the ages. So that's my tidbits on the whole thing.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, interpreting symbols is a difficult exercise. Sometimes it's done very loosely and improperly. I always think of Jordan Maxwell. He's the most notorious master of this, where a similar word in English somehow translates into some ancient, mystical meaning, and making the most loose connections between things that really have no connection whatsoever. Like the Masons are famous for doing this. If you think about the example I always bring up of the fact that Masons will say that the name Solomon is Sol, which is, the sun, Om, and then On. So Om being like the Om, right? So you have like 3 different ancient traditions have nothing to do with one another in terms of the name of Solomon, which means Shalom, right? But the Masons will read into this very elaborate esoteric doctrine. And you see this repeated in a lot of these pseudo conspiracy theorist researchers who are really just crackpots and cranks who will, again, associate things that have no direct connection. It's like when YouTubers will, look at a cross and they'll say, like, if you look at the Gnostic cross, right, which is the circle with the cross in it. I could look at that symbol and say, this is the Gnostic cross, therefore all usage of the cross is Gnostic. That would be utterly retarded, but it's the same kind of fallacy that people engage in literally when they do this stuff. That's all the bullet eye that the Zodiac killer used is the same as the Gnostic cross. So therefore, there's been an ancient bloodline of Gnostics who were preparing for the coming of the Zodiac killer. That would be, that's how retarded this stuff is. But that's the means by which people arrive at retarded conclusions through misuse of symbology.
Oh, dude! My dad is a Freemason, so he always shows me the stuff he's reading. And it's always like that. You're right. That's always like, look, this thing in Egypt and this thing over here. Look, that proves that Masonry's been around since the Egyptian times. Like silly crap like that.
It's like Black Israelites.
As far as the Solomon thing goes, I'm not too big. I'm not sure where you guys stop. I always thought it was soul lemons that God was gonna make lemonade out of all of us.
Soul lemons, yeah.
Sounds about right.
And if we were to do the kind of exegesis that Jordan Maxwell does, the soul becomes a lemon. Soul lemon. Hello? What are they trying to tell us? God is a lemonade peddler on the side of the road. 5 cents, save your soul.
And look, it's very easy. When life gives you lemons, aka when the fall happens, you make lemonade, aka salvation.
AID, lemon AID.
Oh man, that's woke. That's woke. Print that. That's your next book.
The Jordan Maxwell Guide to Symbology.
People are asking us if Jordan Peterson is a closeted atheist. I think Jordan Peterson's an open atheist.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, he doesn't believe in God. He's like, oh well, what do you mean by God? What do you believe? What do you mean by if? Shut the hell up, man. You're fucking atheist, dude. The end.
Yeah, I forgot who it was that said that his approach to everything to sound superior is to just every phrase that's uttered, you just ask it as a question.
Well, what do you mean? Well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah,
what's your penis?
What does God mean?
Let's just put it into bro terms here, just for my sake. Just he's a pussy.
Yeah,
he doesn't.
Yeah.
He wants to have the accolades, but he doesn't want to get into the actual debate. And so he has all these big brain obstacles that he puts up there so that he can have these views and yet still kind of maintain inside the frame of today's discourse. But at the same time, it doesn't matter because the left's still going to call him a Nazi at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what he does or how he projects out there with all this nonsense. He's still on the wrong side of history, no matter what.
Not to go on like a Peterson tangent here, but I was listening to some of Sam Harris's critiques of him. Like I said, even though I despise everything Sam Harris stands for and everything he does, I think that his critiques of him were 100% on the ball, because he started comparing like his approach to the Gospels as like the way he started like doing like a mocking thing of Peterson, like, oh look, it's a recipe for cookie for chicken or something. He's like, oh, you add salt and pepper, therefore that represents the duality of life. You need a little bit of light and a little bit of dark. Oh look, yeah, it was like a joke. It was like oh look, I can take any text.
Well, that's why I call him Carl Yum.
but he's right. Like if you don't think if you think that you're just deriving meaning from chaos, and this is I think his core problem is that mistaken understanding of the creation act is this like, oh, you're driving order from chaos. Like then to you it's just like a chaotic scramble of words, of text, and you're pulling meaning from it. But that's not what God did. God didn't create order. God was order from the beginning,
Right,
and spun order out of himself.
it's a curiously Masonic Gnostic reading of Genesis and the creation account, actually. And this is, by the way, one of the errors that I do consistently critique in Dugan.
Yes.
Dugan has the same kind of idea where he talks about chaos and night and Tiamat in the beginning, you know, the void, the abyss of Genesis somehow being necessary to the correlation of logos. So there's a curious parallel between what Dugan says, where I think he's incorrect, and what Peterson says about the beginning of creation, and that these two principles are necessitating one another. And the reason that he believes this, and many people believe this, is because they have a dialectical definition of good and evil. And that's the problem of the history of all Western philosophy, is acceptance of dialectics. This is why we don't believe in or affirm dialectics as a methodology, because it posits something that is a logical distinction or a logical contrast into metaphysics, right? So because I can contrast truth from falsehood, the assumption of all Far Eastern thought, or these metaphysical systems like Peterson adopts, is that must also therefore translate into ontological reality. There must therefore also be truthhood and falsehood as equally existing, Manichaean type principles. And that's not true. That's not what chaos is. That's not what non-being or non-existence is. They're not principles set in dialectical tension with God. And most Orthodox philosophers and theologians who talk about it, they say that exact same thing. I just read this in Lasky. He said, we don't believe non-being or non-existence is some sort of dialectical opposition to God.
Yeah. I would say, I'd add onto that is that one of the Western philosophers that I kind of respect in a lot of ways is Heidegger, just because he brings everything back to Plato as being this invention of this false dialectic, and even he saw, and I always kind of wonder, a lot of these early 20th century figures, sadly, they didn't know anything about orthodoxy. They thought it was a bizarre, weird thing, and I kind of wonder what he would have, if he would have reevaluated with orthodoxy. And to go back with Peterson, you have to, there is something underhanded with it, because if you read, the posthumous autobiographies by Jung, it's obvious that Jung is trying to rebuild Christianity in some kind of a Western ideological concept. You know what I mean? And so you have to be kind of suspicious of Peterson in that same vein. If you're a Jungian, it's almost definite that you know about his motives because you've read a lot of the works.
Absolutely. And by the way, a great thing, everybody who has any skepticism or doubt about your point there, at what everybody should read is a brief essay by Carl. I think Vic, I'm not trying to be rude, but I think Vic, could you mute, because there's a whole lot of scratching.
Am I rustling my mic? Sorry about that. Hold on.
I think
okay, dude. I'm not saying don't talk. I'm just saying when you're scratching your records there.
Yeah, don't worry about
it. There's an essay by Carl Jung I read a long time ago in one of my undergrad classes, and I couldn't believe that this was Carl, because I was new to Carl Jung at the time. I was like, oh, this guy's cool. He's interesting. And it's about the Antichrist. He has an essay on the Aeon and the Antichrist. And what he essentially says in there is the most Luciferian type doctrine you've ever heard. It's like Charles Manson level theology. He says that Christ is Antichrist. They're two forces, just like chaos and creation and logos are two forces. So in the same way, at the end of time, the Christ necessitates the Antichrist. And that's what I see this underlying a lot of the presuppositions of Peterson.
And you can find this again and again in the West, is this Gnosticism of the black and the white, that they have to be equal parts. And there's always one that's feeding off the other. And we just have to deal with that. We just have to accept that. We have to make it. We have to empower it within ourselves. We can use it. We can learn to. Yeah.
It's everywhere. It's freaking everywhere, dude.
Absolutely insane. You know.
Well, this is interesting because the Orthodox eschatology has specifically refuted this. It's actually Saint Gregory Nazianzus, Saint Gregory Nyssa, and Saint Maximus that specifically deal with the question of how even free will is not defined by good and evil. And we have to say that because in the eschaton there will not be evil, but we all believe that there will still be free will. And so this is one reason why we don't believe in absolute divine simplicity in the beatific vision Catholic sense, Roman Catholic sense, is because the beatific vision necessitates there only being one good in the afterlife, which is the essence of God. If there's only one good and that's all that you can choose, then you don't really have multiple choices in the afterlife. And so only Orthodox theology actually in its eschatology adheres to multiple goods by which you can choose from in the eschaton as well, thus retaining free will. And this is why what the Petersons and these kind of people do is that they will absolutize and eternalize anything that they see operating principles within fallen time and space. And this is really the crux of all pagan religions. All pagan religions absolutize principles that they see operant in nature to be eternal. That's the essence of Far Eastern thought, and that's the essence of paganism.
Yeah, and as far as like the kind of pagans that we deal with on Twitter.com, like the racist pagans, like they do that, but to race, they see race as the core thing, and like they'll adopt or not adopt principles based on how it helps them fight white genocide or whatever.
Yeah, to just add on to this is that my biggest critique on the alt-right in general is this dishonesty, this consistent dishonesty. Like you will get on Twitter and they will post something, and it's like Muslim man attacks some French girl in a supermarket. And it doesn't take 3 or 4 down the thread and replies. No, this happened in Israel. You know what I mean? And people are like calling this video. It's just, but they're okay with that because the ends justify the means. They're non-ideological, but they still are so concerned about winning that they'll just falsify things.
This is one of the reasons why the evangelical movement in America collapsed so hard, was because they would lie so much, so often. I remember back when I was in high school, back when Marilyn Manson was like still relevant and he wasn't like a fat, disgusting slob like he is now. It was like they would say, "Oh, he passes a bowl of spit around the audience. They all spit in it, and then he goes back, and then he drinks it." And it's like, dude, this isn't fucking true. Why are you saying this? But they say it because they're like, "Oh, we can get one over on him." It was say something about Ozzy Osbourne, like, "Oh, he bit the head off a bat," which was true, but it was an accident because people would throw rubber bats at him, and this one day, a real bat flies in his face. He grabs it, bites it. He's like, "Holy crap, this is a real freaking bat!" He has to like stop the concert.
Yeah, he's probably afraid he has rabies or something.
Yeah, right. But then like it developed this whole like this, and this is one of the reasons that people stopped trusting evangelicals, and they completely lost all political power. I mean, they still have like nominal here and there, but like nothing like it used to be, dude. It used to be all pervasive, but people they would just lie. They were just dishonest. They would just fucking lie all the time.
Whatever gets our point across.
Exactly. It's all about like what wins. Can we win? Not is it true? Not is it valid? Not is it provable? Like, oh, but will we win with this? And then this is my biggest gripe with the Neo-Pagans. And some I'll say this: some have gotten better with it. Not that they walked away from Neo-Pagan. Not that they've walked away from Neo-Paganism, but they stopped. There's a few who've stopped griping about, well, is this good for our movement? And they started an actual theological conversation with some of the more theologically minded people. But it's very few. Most of them are still like, preserve your folk, preserve your race, worship Odin. Most of them are still like that.
And we'll cherry pick anthropology. We'll cherry pick IQ tests or whatever it takes. Like I remember reading one from one of these lunatics that they were like, we developed, you know, white skin because of the clouds were always in the sky and there was never any sun, and we just developed blue eyes because of the same thing, so we could see in the night. It was just like, so
because we're hunting icebergs in the north.
yeah, it's just like, no, that's just so retarded. What are you not even like? You're not appeasing anyone. You're not appeasing neo-pagans. You're not appeasing evolutionists. You're just talking nonsense. It's just the bong hits of neo-pagans are just so annoying.
Times changed. Times are strange. Here I come and I ain't the same. Mama, I'm coming home.
That was for Rick, since he was talking about Ozzy.
Oh, yeah,
You're so low.
dude. First of all, I love that song.
I thank Rick for standing up for me against the evangelical. I want to thank Rick. Yeah, thank you.
I want to thank Rick for standing up for me against the evangelical misforming of people. But also, don't get me singing songs I like, because as Sean will attest, I do love the karaoke.
He does love the karaoke, I'll tell you that. One of the best things that Ozzy Osbourne ever said, I remember him talking to his daughter, and he said, she wanted to get a tattoo. And he's like, if you want to be fucking original, don't get a fucking tattoo. Everybody has a fucking tattoo. It's true. Yeah. It's like it's the NPC thing. It's like, if you really want to be original, don't do any of the things that everybody else is doing, because that's what they're all doing. Premarital sex and just, promiscuousness, getting tattoos and all this, being an atheist, being it's just all just store.
My wife teaches first graders. Okay, she has a tattoo. Everyone has a fucking tattoo. Yeah. It's not cool anymore. It's just a thing.
I do love the guys on Facebook, or because we all have these friends that are like, that's their thing, and so they still like to act like it's 1950, and no one has tattoos. And I'm in the comment section, buddy, my CEO has like a neck tattoo. Like my supervisor has sleeves. Dude, shut up. No one is oppressing you for your tattoo.
Hey, yeah. Okay. Okay. Here in the chat, someone said, once had a Pagan tell me that the apostles lied about Christ for fame and fortune.
Classic. That's exactly what they got.
Bro, those sick Roman book deals,
Yeah, they were making money.
Tell all books about Jesus.
They were just rolling in it, dude. Just hundos.
Bank.
And over again. Just
making
it.
Tax.
I think here's my thought. My thought is that the reason people are looking to that stuff is because they're seeing the emptiness of the whole YouTube skeptic sphere. Like, that's empty. So if you have any brains, people are interested in, the right. There's not a whole lot of options if you're leaving the skeptic route. And so I think, and by the way, I also think it's establishment promoted. I think the establishment is interested in people returning to these little niches. So you can have your little pagan group over here. Mm-hmm. You can have your archaeofuturism, your promoted establishment primitivism, archaic revival type stuff, which I think is, again, I think you could demonstrate that has CIA connections, no doubt about it in my mind. But the thing is that there's not one paganism. So the assumption of a person on a path seeking truth is that they're going to find truth. They're going to find what they're looking for. And as many of the fathers say, we have to be worried about spiritual experiences, right? Like, spiritual experiences on their own can be very deceptive. They can deceive us. So people are looking for authentic existential spiritual experience, and they think that, well, if I go with the neo-pagan route, my wolf brothers in the wood, this kind of stuff, the return to the Volk, right? When you look at what's his name, is it Shrek, the Church of Satan guy? He was saying all the alt-right talking points like 20, 30 years ago when he was going on Donahue and shit. He was saying, I believe in the white European race. I believe that we have the wolf spirit and all this kind of shit.
You're You're talking to the right guy because I used to be a LaVeyan Satanist.
Okay.
So I used to have like my stack of LaVey books, which I threw away or recycled before I got baptized. Sadly, before my priest told me to burn them, I'm like, oh, I would burn them, but I already threw them into the recycling.
Well, so you get the point, though. You know this. You know that's what Nicholas Schreck talked about in interviews about this kind of older alt-right talking points that are popular now.
It was nothing new. Nothing. People were like, "Oh, it's this new and cutting." It's like, dude, this has been around since like the '80s at the latest.
So the embarking on a path looking for what's true, you can't really escape the philosophical question of what's true. So I'm not going to ramble for a long time. Just making the point that what you're looking for, what you're assuming is some kind of absolute metaphysical principle, some kind of absolute notion of truth with a capital T, capital L logos, whatever, that's fine. And that metaphysical principle that you're looking for is not going to be found in a system that is predicated on chaos. And ultimately, unfortunately, that's what the pagan and neo-pagan systems are founded on, is the idea of multiple gods, polytheism, all this kind of stuff. And really, the ultimate principle in that system is fate, right? Ultimately, it falls back on, you can have all these different gods. You can have the pantheon, the gods of Olympus or whatever gods you want to have. But the problem is that all of those systems end up with an impersonal absolute, fate or whatever. If you adopted Hindu, if you adopted something Hindu, it would be the impersonal absolute of ultimate Maya and transcending all dualities and all this bullshit. And so again, you just get fate. You get ruled by fate, and man loses his dignity. Man loses the image of God. Man has no worth in those systems. And so ultimately, neo-paganism, paganism they just collapse back into the same problems of any other atheistic system.
Yeah. And that's exactly what, I definitely want to bring up, is the fact that we don't, like, neo-paganism is an absolute LARP. Like, I mean, it really is, because we have no clue of what these cultures were at all. The only way we even know about them is because Orthodox monks wrote about them, and they transcribed a lot of the things that they wrote down for academic purposes. Mm-hmm. But what we do know from the small amount of historical records that we do have, it really does highlight, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not an academic at all, but as far as I'm concerned, as being a student of this for years and upon years, is that they were suffering the same existential crisis that we are now before Christianity came along, and it made sense. Because I say this again and again, I'm not a progressive. I don't believe that we're evolving or progressing into better people. I think the ancients had a lot of wisdom and a lot of great things, and they thought a lot of the same thoughts that we have. And I think that they understood Christianity from a purely theological level, on the same intellectual level that we are now. And once they understood Orthodox theology, that's when everything made sense. Everything, even their own myths, all of it made sense at that point, And I keep on harping on this, but I believe it's true, because as Jay said, as most Orthodox people have always said, is that Christ was always here. He wasn't just some guy that was born 2,000 years ago.
Right.
He's always existed. We've always had a presupposition of Christ coming. All cultures have. And it was fulfilled, and all of these things the demons taught us through the so-called gods came true when Christ came to earth. And once they heard the gospel, everything totally made sense. The nihilism vanished; it all went away. They had a wholesome reason, logic, and spirituality that was involved with it. That's why.
It makes sense that the demons would give us these false mythologies that eventually point to Christ, because as I've read from a lot of sources, is that being so repelled by and away from God, they can't create anything new.
Yes.
Right. Yes,
well, look at Hollywood nowadays.
There's nothing about remakes. A train, constant, unending freaking train of remakes, adaptations, nothing new.
Well, speaking of Jung and archetypes, or if you read one of the literary theorists like Northrop Frye, who was influenced by Carl Jung, he talks about the basic archetypes as they apply to stories. So one thing that is true is that there's only a few basic stories that you can do, archetypal stories. And so, yes, I think there's something to that, that even in these Gnostic mythologies, there's still elements of Christianity. I was just watching Blade, which is completely ridiculous, but even Blade, this Wesley Snipes movie from the 90s, can't stay away from this idea of a miraculous birth, the idea of dying to save his people, bloodlines and blood having power. This is essentially ultimately about the blood of Christ, right? So even when they don't recognize it, they're still preaching the same story. And absolutely, this is why the church fathers said that the pagan myths are in very fuzzy, muddled ways actually do still teach the principles of Christianity. And that's why we can reinterpret them and reread them. One great example of this is Beowulf. Most people believe, if you study the history of Beowulf, the mythology of it was how it was monks preserving the story and kind of trying to use it to present Beowulf like Christ as the hero against Grendel, right? So that,
who was it? Saint Justin Martyr, what he called it was the spermaticos logos.
Logos spermaticos, right? Exactly.
I think, Jay, you've touched on this before also, and we might be getting a little bit too far off on this, but I think it's very vital. Is that a lot of Western saints that came along to these pagan communities, they found very Charles Manson-esque communities that were the people were kind of enthroned to this shaman who was feeding them psychedelics and keeping them in this basically in this kind of enslavitude of these bizarre rituals that he was doing, and it was a total power game, like all the cults that we have now. Nothing is new under the sun. We keep on seeing the same things happening.
Well, even the human sacrifice cults, bizarrely enough, retain the elements of truth of Christianity, because it's very bizarre that universally across the world, all of these religions, which have throughout the passage of time, seemingly no connection to one another, why do they all have basic patterns, basic ideas of offering sacrifice? Why would that even be there? It's not just because of manipulative high priests, although that is there. You do have that a lot of shamans manipulating people. But if you read, for example, Mircea Eliade's book on shamanism, he points out every shamanic tradition across the world that he studied has the same basic patterns of initiation for their rituals and rites. So what that suggests is that there is truth to these ritual patterns, right? This is why there is the notion in man somehow innately that you do need to offer up something to God, right? It goes back to Cain and Abel. We see it at the very beginning. We have this in us for some reason. I think it's because we're made in the image of God, but all the cultures retain these things. And yes, the demons pervert it. The demons turn it to worshiping devils. But this is why St. John Damascene can write his book on all the heresies, and he can say ultimately that even the pagan religions are just heresies from the one true religion, which is ours.
I got that. I got a collection of his books in one volume because on your recommendation, Jay. Really good, but it's like, I guess you could say it's not light reading. But it's fantastic, truly fantastic. And you're right. It's like it's kind of mind blowing. Like every error is expressed in heresy. It's and like man.
Right. So he can start with paganism and say this is an error on the doctrine of God the Father. Right. The idea that there's not one God but many gods. So in a way, I mean, in the history of the church, obviously, heresy and schism take on a more technical note, but he's applying it generally because all the world religions essentially have the same basic departures or problems in their philosophy, and that's why I often, critique absolute divine simplicity, because that undergirds not just Latin Roman Catholicism and its dogma, but also undergirds Islam and aspects of Judaism. So you see this same problem of how can we speak of God as absolutely simple, and at the same time there being distinctions in him without falling into these kinds of traps of absolute divine simplicity. And in my mind, only Orthodox theology maintains that, with its distinction between nature and person, and its distinction between essence and energy. So that's why that stuff is so crucial. I mean, no other religion teaches the essence energy distinction. Literally, I've never seen one that comes close.
Well, there's a buddy of ours that we used to be in the chat that he was a Byzantine Catholic, he started finding some of this stuff in very early Taoism. All this like
In very
these
what?
very early Taoism.
Oh, okay.
And he started saying that the parallels between early Taoism and the theology of the church were pretty crazy, and it was like they were tapping into the same vein, but they still didn't have the fullness.
Yeah.
Because they still had like this expectation, and you can see it in their writings. He posted like 20, 30 pages at a time sometimes of these texts he was reading. But you can see like they were still kind of looking for the incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredible when you look at it that way. That like this is a truth. Like Paul said, this is the law is written on man's hearts. Like this is a truth that we all kind of know, and sometimes we just need the words to spell it out for us.
Yeah, I think that's how Paul can say in Acts 17 to the pagans, the word is near you, even in your heart.
Yes.
Because quite literally, every man, Christ lighteth every man that comes into the world. We've already got an apologetic argument within us, which is our own logos, which is pointing us in the direction. This is why St. Maximus can say that nature presupposes grace, right? So we don't accept the Roman Catholic distinction of this two-layered system of nature and grace. There is a distinction, but it's not stacked on like the Roman Catholics think. It's more like the interpenetration, right? So this is why the incarnation is the model for soteriology, because the divine energies of Christ interpenetrate his human nature without the human nature losing its own natural properties and faculties. So in the same way, when we participate in grace, it's natural to grace is natural to man. That's the way Father Staniloy talks about it. That's the way St. Maximus talks about it. And this is very distinct from the tendency in Roman Catholicism, post-Augustinianism, because they believe in a sort of a dialectical tension between man's will and God's will. There's a because man is almost he's so fallen that he's it's almost Calvinism, like he's in constant rebellion against God. That's not true. He's not in constant rebellion. He does tend to corruption when he gives into his passions, but his will is not the problem. It's a corrupted will. It's a fall that's the problem. Anyway, you guys know all that, but I'm just
it's like a fragmented will.
I wouldn't mind that.
I've heard it written as like a fragmented will, which is makes sense from I think from anyone's personal experience of wanting different things, conflicting things sometimes at different times at the same time.
And just to add in on that is we talk about Genesis and just the Garden of Eve and with Eve and Adam and how we're susceptible to these things. And so, not to get too apocryphal, but like the idea of these demons being able to suggest pantheons or to suggest multiple gods makes total sense, because of course they think they're equal to God, or that they're at the same level as God. So of course they're going to suggest this idea that there's multiple gods that are involved with it, and of course there's going to be people susceptible to this because of our fallen nature and the fact that our pride can overwhelm us, to the fact that we believe that we have some kind of control over the world, or and I think that goes into a lot of the neo-pagan Nietzschean ideals, because I think that when we talk about neo-paganism, we cannot separate it from the Nietzschean idea, because Nietzsche has really crept into neo-paganism, and that's why I've always said that there was no Nietzschean neo-paganism. Like these cultures did not understand these concepts like these people do now. The neo-pagans now are very much Nietzscheans.
Yeah,
they're very much about the will to power. It's about pride, and it's very antichrist in that manner.
Which is really funny, because they often accuse Christianity of pushing slave morality, like Nietzsche did, because he encountered, in my opinion, a bastardized Christianity, and his location and time in history. That's what he encountered,
and that's important to say.
Exactly.
His window of time and place. Yeah, I mean, of course. And that's why I do appreciate Nietzsche, was the fact that he did tear down a lot of the stupid Victorian morality of the Protestants and the Roman Catholics at the time. I do appreciate a lot of the things that he did.
Like Seraphim Rose said, that he hungered for Christ more than anything.
Right.
But okay. But for neo-pagans to accuse like all Christianity of embracing slave morality, while like if you look at the things they say, it is nothing but dreams of vengeance, nothing but like spurned honor and like slinking it away, okay, like
Nietzsche
said,
called it
this
resentiment.
phrase, slinking, exactly, resentment, slinking away, dreaming of revenge, like idolizing and like fomenting this like diseased feeling of just like, oh, one day I'm going to get them. Like this is nothing. Like these angry neo-pagans who despise Christianity for honestly beating them in history. That's nothing but slave morality. That is real slave morality. Like,
well, let's go back. Let's go back to Pilate. Like if you look at the Gospels and when Christ is on the scene, you have the union of two groups that hate Christ and Christianity. And what do you know? That same union exists today. You have the what would eventually become the Talmudic tradition of the scribes and Pharisees hating Jesus, allied with Pilate and Pilate's relativism, right?
Damn.
And ultimately they're all relativistic, because what does Pilate say? Pilate say, what is truth? Jesus says, So you have the Roman pagan relativism mixed with the Talmudic relativism, allied to destroy the idea that there is objective truth and logos.
Yeah.
God, yeah, that's perfect.
We got a guy on here on the chat. He says, paganism also perpetuates vendettas and blood feuds. Without Christ's grace, there was no way for the people to let go of pain. We see this today tragically. When you invent your own gods, you can't aspire to anything better. Atheism is yet another god. The economy is another one. Okay, yeah, that's.
What about being a slave to a vendetta? What about that enslaving? I mean, I've been watching The Sopranos, and Tony Soprano is enslaved to the idea that he has to exact equal vengeance or greater vengeance whenever he's challenged or something goes wrong, right? I mean, this is part of the mafia mob rule. I mean, he kind of seems like an unhappy enslaved guy in the series, right? I mean, I haven't finished it. I don't know where it's going to go.
And I'll back
you're right. And
because Jay has a really good point, because the first scene is with him and his psychiatrist, and what is he getting to is that he says it. He's like, I feel like everything's been done. I feel like my ancestors have already done everything. And she says to him, well, a lot of people of this generation feel this way, that there's nothing else to be done. You know what I mean? There's an existential crisis that happens when you get to this point, that you feel like everything's been done, and you get to these cycles of vendetta, of anger, and you can't escape it. I mean,
right.
This is exactly where you're headed at. This is exactly what I would assume that our ancestors were at when Christianity came to save them.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah.
Dude, it's the answer to this sense of like of harmed honor is humility. And this is why there's the church fathers, and there's a great book I have, a little tiny book, How to Live a Holy Life. I recommend it to all you guys, and not because I live by it myself, because it's tough, but it is fantastic, because I'm a very practical guy. I'm all about like, okay, but like what's needed for me, like day to day. So this book is very much about that sort of approach. It's orthodox, and it's all about like, how do you live day to day? How do you approach this situation? How do you approach that situation? And one of the first chapters, and one of the most profound chapters, is how do you defend yourself when you're slighted? Because it makes this sort of demarcation between what you need, the sort of status you must maintain in public and life to like be effective. Like you can't be effective if everyone thinks you're a piece of shit. But you also can't be so attached to your status that you're being hyper defensive all the time. So sometimes you have to, when someone says something, and this is one of the wisest things in the book, it says when something comes at you, when accusations fly your way, before you lash out, stop, take account of them, and say, could this be true? Even if slightly, even if it's in a way I'm not aware of. A little bit. Could it be true? A little bit, though. And that's tough, man.
It is tough. Yeah, no, I fall into being defensive all the time, especially, you know, if you're getting stuff thrown at you all the time. It's very easy to fall into that defensive mode and react with passion, with anger, and not with you know, thinking about it and letting it. It would be better to just let it subside. I did want to make one point though about to bring it full circle to the point with paganism and the absolute, because a lot of people, like if they've seen debates and stuff, they always say, well, okay, so you've got philosophical arguments. How do you bring that into the idea of incarnation? And there's a really good paper that a guy wrote. His name's Dr. Stephen Clark. I think he's a doctor. He has a master's. I forget what. But anyway, the paper is public on like academia.edu, and it's about St. Maximus the Confessor and the Logos and the Logoi. And what he does is he talks about how all of the principles, the Logoi in nature, ultimately really have to be subsumed into a divine mind. And so he connects it from St. Maximus to why you need a personal divine creator. And I think that's very helpful if you understand the where paganism leads to in its philosophy. If you understand that you need a unifying principle, and the only way to have a unifying principle is to not just have like the Greeks had with like impersonal abstract forces, but to actually have an incarnate divine mind. It's a very profound, fascinating chapter from St. Maximus that Dr. Clark expounds on in that paper. It's not very long, but I found it very helpful. And the reason I say all that is because this brings us back to creation. What we get with St. Maximus is the idea that God interpenetrates creation, and that he always has, as you just said, like the Logos has always been here. He's not some guy that just came on the scene. He's not a human person at all.
Making war out of chaos.
It's not, yeah. Now, why do I say all that? Well, I was reading some fascist literature. I had somebody send me a speech from Hitler, and there's a curious part in a Hitler speech where he says that the problem with the Jews and the problem with the God of the Jews, and in his mind, he means the God that's also in Christianity, is that the God of the Old Testament is incompatible. So he has a Marcionite view. Hitler does.
Yeah. If you read
there's an interesting
Sorry, go ahead.
There's an interesting essay from Himmler as well, where Himmler says that, you know, the God of the Jews was Christianity was a scam to try to emasculate, you know, the European peoples, and they use Christianity. So the reason that I did that stream on Old Testament, New Testament continuity was because this is a big missed thing. This is what a lot of people miss. I mean, you have this long tradition in the history of Orthodoxy of the idea of an Orthodox imperium, the idea of, we still carry on this idea that self-defense is a biblical position. The church fathers teach the death penalty. They teach self-defense. Paul says that that Caesar has the sword as a minister of God. Okay, so it's the fault of modern so-called Orthodox and liberals who shirk all of this, who reject all of this, who have bought into the idea that there's such a thing as a divide between the secular, that you can have an atheistic state, retain your pious personal religion. All of that Americanism is what has infected people with the idea that to be a Christian is to be emasculated, when that's the furthest thing from the truth. Orthodox Christianity Christianized the imperium and created a Christian civilization. And it did that because it didn't accept Marcionism and rejecting the idea of the Old Testament. Because even St. Maximus says in his chapters on love, he says, yes, the New Testament is a superior revelation, and we have Pentecost, but that doesn't mean that the prescriptions of the Old Testament, namely the law and what it forbids, that it's somehow bad. It still operates to forbid what is good, what is bad, and to promote what is good. So even in these, you know, across these church fathers, they reject Marcionism, but Marcionism is everywhere in Orthodoxy, and it's the same Gnostic root. I mean, modern Orthodoxy, I'm saying. There's all these people who they think that Jesus came and he's not like the mean God of the Old Testament.
Okay, I think we can pin it under a certain term to delineate from real classical Orthodoxy. Maybe like hipsterdoxy, or like you said, normie-doxy.
Normie-dox, yeah.
Yeah, freaking normie-dox, or the hipsterdox of the worst of the worst.
Or Ameridox,
like the what you call it, that page on Twitter
Is it the coffee shop one?
No, hipster orthodoxy something. What the heck is it called? It was like, dude. But I met one of the guys who runs it. I want to see who he is or how I met him or where, but I met him, and I gotta tell you, he's not a good example of any sort of orthodoxy. He does drugs, prays with heretics. It's a lot of bad stuff. But oh, okay. The page is called "Ask an Orthodox Hipster."
Yeah.
Yeah, just toxic. And you know what? There's one guy I know who knows him, and he might be listening. If you're listening, you know who you are. Say something about it, you piece of cowardly shit.
You know, and not to interrupt your rage, but I want to back up a little bit of what Jay was saying earlier. Is that as Orthodox, we read the Bible in 4 ways. You know what I mean? And that's the whole Bible, the entire Bible. First, we read it as, you know, the personal testimony of God with an obedience to that. You know, the second way is we read it through the church, and the church is the new Israel. It is Christ. And then that'd be the third thing is that we read it through a Christ view. So we find Christ within the Old Testament. And then the fourth, of course, would be personal. So it works on 4 different levels that we read the Old Testament. All of those things work, and they're completely congruent. And the only way that you're going to make sense out of the Old Testament through the Gospels is if you read it in that way. That's how the church fathers prescribed it, and that's how we read it. And you're not going to make sense out of it. You're always going to get back into the same ideas that all the other ideological components that have come along with Protestantism or whatever later on, where you can separate both of them. The only way you can make them come together is through the Orthodox way. No one else has been able to do it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and this would be. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Go ahead.
Someone in the chat said bongo doxy. I'm not sure if that means like with a bong or with bongo drums. But both ways are funny.
Bong.
Well, as Father Rose says in the his famous nihilism book, I mean, there's the idea that there's not a traditional Orthodox teaching on social order, and so the government is preposterous. I mean, anybody who knows the history of the church knows the countless kings and saints who were kings, and the countless councils called by emperors, and how the 7th council calls them the God-ordained emperors, would find this completely preposterous. Anybody who's read the Code of Justinian, I talk about this kind of stuff all the time, knows that is the right view. But what we get in a lot of so-called, as you said, hipster docs, normie docs, Ameridocs, is the idea that the principles of America and the Constitution of 1776 and the Enlightenment, that's where we start with the idea of the private realm. You have your private confession, and then everybody else has the right to do whatever they want in the religious sphere. No, that's not true. I'm sorry, but the God who in the 10 Commandments says you shall have no other gods, that still applies. It's still true today. You can't get rid of the 10 Commandments. Jesus reaffirms the 10 Commandments in the New Testament. So again, we wouldn't see the church fathers teaching the legality of the death penalty, the just nature of war. As St. Athanasius says, at times war can be just, and killing in the battlefield can be a virtuous action, St. Athanasius says. So there's countless examples of this, and really it's a reliance upon ignorance, a reliance upon a pseudo super spirituality where I feel like I'm pious if I point out how Jesus doesn't want me interested in a Christian society. Jesus just wants me to be pious, and for Christianity to have anything to do with the social sphere is somehow legalistic or Pharisaic or some relic of the Old Testament is just, again, utter nonsense when you know the first 1,500 years of Christianity.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then just not even to mention like the strict nominalism that would be involved with just trying to recreate a church and a society. I mean, the culture flows from the church. It flows from the monastery. RIB has been saying this for years. You cannot be a neo-reaction and try to recreate this on a sociological level. That is like modernism 101, and it's going to lead straight to the nihilism that we have now. You can't. It has to come from the church. There's no other way. You have to have a spiritual element that's there. It's God. It's Christ. It's real. That's the thing.
And that's why Father Rose says that the true Orthodox doctrine of social theory and government is the Orthodox Imperium. And that's what's come down to us from history. Like you said, you can't just invent it all over and start all over as if the church can shed everything that came from the past. I mean, we're not going to recreate Byzantium, but the point is that we've already been given these forms that tell us how it should be. So we can either obey that, and look what happens when people obey it and they're willing to die for it. You conquer the empire, you Christianize the empire, you create Byzantium. When you're not willing to believe that and you cower, you get conquered and ruled over. So guess what? That's what God said in Deuteronomy. He said, if you're faithful to the covenant, I will smash all your enemies. That's why the traditional prayers, the Orthodox prayers contain imprecatory prayers. What about the prayers about victory over the Hagarites? What about that? That's not very ecumenical. No, because that's the tradition. Right? So if you're faithful to that, then God conquers the enemies.
This is why this error is how you end up getting like Catholic politicians in America who say, well, personally, I don't agree with abortion, but I will never a woman's right to choose, because they think this is like this bizarre kind of right. It's like this weird separation between the public and private sphere, and I think the American notion has exacerbated this, because now
that is America, yeah.
For religion, freedom of religion has been construed into this thing. Well, as long as I can pray in private, I still have my freedoms. Like you don't.
Yeah.
You fucking don't, dude.
Well, I think there's that these people get lost in all of this, and I keep on coming back to this. Like we talked in a previous episode, Rick. It's just because we have allies. Like, okay, so we are kind of. We're quote unquote alt-right or Nazis. Compare everybody that's on the liberal side of the sphere. They're not going to know these nuances. They don't care about this. They're always going to call us that. But I will have an ally within possibly the alt-right, because or even it. I mean, and it's no difference than if you're Orthodox and you're posting Trump memes. Now Trump is like 99 point, maybe 85% on our side, but he's getting us further towards our goal. Now, there's a difference between having an ally with somebody and incorporating his beliefs within your belief system and trying to retrofit them inside of it. Now, yes. I will stand outside and say, yes, I'm using Trump. I will say that. I am using Trump to further my ideas of the one and true church. You know what I mean? But as soon as he comes back on me, I'm going to come back on him, of course. You know what I mean?
What does this is the traditional Russian prayer book, cast down the blasphemous kingdom of the Hagarenes and subject it to the Orthodox kings, confirm in right belief, and raise up the horn of all Orthodox Christians.
Well, thanks, Jay. You just got me deplatformed from AFR. There goes my chance.
Yeah. Well, consider it an honor to be deplatformed.
Well, I mean, I will say that RIB is like half theology and philosophy of politics, and the other half is 13-year-olds in sexual education class, and the teacher just said penis. I mean, that's pretty much. So I don't think you're in AFR anyhow.
Okay, like usually for the AFR content, I'll stick to the stuff I like. I like The Arena by Father Josiah Trenum. He's fantastic. Except for his latest patriotism series, which I've heard is kind of questionable. Which I'm not sure. I haven't heard the whole thing.
Let's listen to it first.
Exactly. Yes. Of course. But the there's Father Thomas Hopko. Of blessed memory. He had some things I disagree with. There's stuff here and there that I like and I don't like. But lately, I've been listening to, I guess, what I can call since your conflict with Farademic, Jay, I was listening to some of the AFR mainstream content. The stuff they put out front and center, the the Ancient Faith Presents kind of stuff. I even found a couple podcasts that they did back during the Charlottesville rally, and I gotta say, like, my disappointment was immeasurable.
Well,
I quit following them 10 years ago when they were so gung-ho about Stephen Freeman, who doesn't believe in the historicity of the Old Testament. So
if there's anyone, which is like unlikely, anyone from AFR listening, doubtful, but who knows? If you come up with such a hard line against racism, denying the full humanity to people of other races, denying the image of Christ and people of other races, which on that tenet alone I will agree. You can't support privilege theory and claim to not be a racist, because privilege theory is nothing but gaslighting and victimizing white people. It's all about saying you can't criticize things because you're white. You can't say this and that because you're white, therefore you're affluent and have a lot of money and have never suffered. All these stupid ideas. And there's a lot of people in AFR who push this thing, either by outright word or by kind of subtle, like, oh, maybe I just hint at the theory. I'm sorry, that's as fucking racist as just being a Klansman who like dreams of a pile of dead black babies. Nothing less racist about it.
yeah, but you're talking to people who are interested in virtue signaling and trying to show how moral they are, and this is notorious amongst the Ortho. I mean, I have to say that Roman Catholics and Protestants, nobody beats spiritual virtue signaling Orthodox take the cake for spiritual virtue signaling. They're the most most notorious of this, and this is something I've seen for 10 years. So yeah, you pointed out an obvious hypocrisy, and they're not interested in hearing why that's hypocritical. They would just rather you leave, go away, shut up.
Well, I mean, as far as the worst, I mean, I'm not sure, Jake. Can you beat the freaking Jesuits on this? I don't know. These are pretty bad, man. I'm not sure if you can beat them at it. They're pretty bad at it. Or pretty good, I guess.
Well, the thing with the Jesuits is that they're so blatantly not Christian, and the thing with the Orthodox pietists is that they come off as super Christian. So it's a close call. It's a good point. There's a close call there. But I mean, the Jesuits, like Martin, I mean, they're so off the rails and obvious operatives to destroy the religion that, I mean, they don't even count as Christian. But the Orthodox pietists, are like the most. They're the essence of Pharisee. I mean, I would say that they even top, like Calvinists for being like supreme Pharisees.
Father Martin. I want to say Father Martin. Martin. What's his face? The Jesuit. He said that calling someone a heretic is hate speech now.
Well, I'll add something on this. Is that also you have to accept the fact that most Orthodox came over here and they kind of what do you call it? Grabbed on to a minority status.
Americanism, yeah, they're Democratic Party. The Greeks, they were brought into the Democratic Party. We're the minority. We're going to help you. And now they've totally co-opted by the CIA, which runs the Democratic Party, to be this foundation-funded thing. That's why they love Bartholomew. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. That's the clincher of the whole thing.
Yep.
And you'll find this all the time. It's just like if you talk about white American, or they constantly talk about this, especially like AFR is notorious for talking about when are we going to get an American Orthodoxy? And the funny thing is that we all know they're not going to talk about the racial issue because supposedly they're like on some kind of a higher level where race doesn't matter, ethnicity doesn't matter in this America. And then you automatically have to question that because either they really buy into their crap, or the fact that they're not being, especially with a lot of the quote unquote like white Americans that are involved with it that are saying this. What they're really they're not interested in going that far down the rabbit hole of understanding their own identity, because that is just such criminal thought. They can't even do it. So they have to, again, have your big brain thing where we're going to have an American orthodoxy beyond race. And then it just screams ecumenicalism.
We don't want that, because the people who would be behind that are run by the deep state. So we definitely don't want that.
But we can have the order of St. Moses the Black for Black Americans, African Americans. But if you were to have anything like that for whites, you would be excommunicated immediately.
Yeah, and if you attend an Arab parish, a lot of Arab parishes will run you out if you're white. So,
yeah.
Well, Sean,
and that is a legitimate problem of ethnophylatism, right? People use that in the wrong way, but sometimes that does exist, where there is a legitimate thing where it's like, oh, we're the Greeks here. You're not really, go off somewhere else. You're not really supposed to be.
Well, I did experience that in the Greek parish by some woman who never showed her face in the parish before that day. That she was like, "How come you're here and not in a Catholic church?" And I was like, "Well, I think this is the real church. I think this is the true church. Yada yada yada, the whole thing." And she's like, "Well, maybe you're more comfortable in the Catholic church." And I was like, "This is like a after school special."
I know.
And just a sad personal story from my side of the view with the Antiochians is that most of them were Freemasons, of course.
Yeah.
And the other fact is that they were very proudly Syrian. I could talk to a lot about ethnicity and a lot about race and things like that. But at the same time, they were able to deny my experience as, a historical white American. For my family's been here for 300, 400 years and stuff like that. And then, but sadly, all of their efforts of trying to keep their ethnicity is totally exploded in the American experiment. Their kids were not involved with church at all. They were completely Americanized and running around. It's just so sad. It's like, I kind of understand. I'm coming here because it's already happened to my people. It's already happened to the Black people that live here. Yeah, and now it's happening to you, but they don't connect the dots. They just
That's globalism. That's the whole message of the Godfather. In Godfather 1, they leave because they want a better life and to make money. And by Godfather 3, Michael Corleone is back in Italy, and he loses his daughter, and he goes to confession, and he dies unhappy and miserable, losing everything because he realized.
Spoilers, Jay. Spoilers.
Well, who hasn't seen Godfather? I mean, you have to see part 3 because it's the clincher of the 3 acts. I mean, that's the whole point, is that what did he gain from the American experience? Nothing but destruction of his people, his culture, and his heritage. Everything he thought he was going to build up in America, he loses.
Yeah, well, even his son is like basically gay. I mean, they couldn't do it back in the early 90s, but his son's gay, right?
He's like the opera singer. Yeah, he chooses to sing opera, and then Sofia Coppola plays the daughter, and she ends up shot by the P2 lodge.
Right.
Well, guys, as someone from a recent immigrant family, I can absolutely verify all of this experience because, I think I've mentioned it briefly on here. My experience as someone whose parents came here from Peru, and I get grief, and not just from Peruvians, from anyone who's possibly of any sort of Hispanic origin. I get mad grief for not speaking like perfect Spanish and not having all these
wait a second.
traditions.
Hey, wait a second. Are you spick-splaining to us right now?
Spick-splaining hardcore. Look, guys, I'm gonna spick-splain so hard. I'm turning my camera on. Are you fucking ready for this, guys?
You're raping my ears with your
bro. Okay, spick-splaining happen right now. I get so much grief for not being like full spick. Like, what do you mean you don't speak perfect Spanish and dance the bachata and have all these stupid music interests? I'm sorry, I fucking hate salsa. All these stupid. Let me not lose myself in a rage because I can easily. Okay, but it's like I told people I don't just tell my parents this. I tell people who complete strangers will feel comfortable in confronting me for not being like the perfect spick in front of them. I'm like, listen, if you wanted me to be the perfect spick, we should have stayed in South America. Why did you come here? And this is something that
Mammon. Everybody thinks they're going to
Mammon. And this is what E. Michael Jones says: is that modernity makes Jews of us all,
Right?
like divorced from our roots. I don't think about being freaking Peruvian. He's proving this to me. Human sacrificing wackos, getting totally owned by cats. Yada yada yada. My family comes to America. That's what I know. I'm sorry. I don't care. I don't care, bro. Camera off for that, folks.
If anybody's interested in Rick's musical taste, let me just say something. I'm a hillbilly from Indiana, and he knows almost more about bluegrass than I do, and that's saying a lot. So that's kind of where Rick's taste lies. Right
I figure it's going to be some low rider, which doesn't even make sense. I know that's like Mexico, but still. I don't know any Peruvian music, so I couldn't.
Okay, just
if
imagine
you
like
Bill Monroe to play that, Rick would listen to it. That's what I'm saying.
Look, I love old school Americana stuff, man. That's good stuff. That's that.
You do.
That's
You're insane
good,
about it.
That's
You love
good
it.
shit.
You know what's weird is that if most of the time in modernity, people love the stuff that they didn't grow up with. So like I grew up with country and bluegrass. I'm sick of it. It doesn't move me. Some of it's okay, but I like all kinds of other stuff. You know what I mean? So I think if you grew up with something you hear all the time, you're kind of you like something else.
It's different because I think me and my dad have this in common is that we both hate Hispanic music. My dad grew up listening to Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and all these old bands, and that's what I grew up listening to because he would play that stuff all the time in my house. You know, so I still have a love for that music, that old rock music. But I see my love for like old country and old bluegrass stuff as like an extension of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of like the sticky music, it just doesn't.
Well, it has
it strikes no chord in me, dude.
As I understand, I'm not 100% positive on this, but doesn't it have the like the Polish Germanic, accordion type sound to it because of like Germanic colonization of Latin and South America. So like when you're listening to the doot, 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 the la bota doot, 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 la bota doot, 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 it has a very polka Germanic type sound.
I don't know, Jay.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
No. I agree with Jay. It definitely in Mexico. It definitely does. There is
the Germans had colonized a lot of that area,
and the same with like Argentina and things like that. But there's that gets me in a whole different rant about Peru and how Peru has these really weird Nordic ties. They have the kind of a similar, like the pagan religions of Peru and the pagan religions of like the North. And this is one of those things that will blow the Neo-Pagans' minds.
Here's the here's the TLDR. Okay, here's the TLDR on like the Peruvian paganism. You have two basic coastal you have two basic terrains in Peru. You have mountains and you have coasts. When you get off the mountains, there's literally a steep cliff on the entire side of the country that just drops straight to coasts. So you have two kinds of people develop, which is just mountain people and coastal people. This is like some like fantasy tier stuff because you have the coastal people who worship lunar gods and the mountain people who worship solar gods, the Incans mostly. The Incans came down, the solar worshipping tribes, the Incans, came down and conquered all the moon worshipping tribes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then and then yada yada yada, they all got freaking owned by Catholics. The end.
Mm-hmm.
It is strange when you think about these things because I remember one of our friends were talking about how with the Russians everything is involved with the East. It's always East, and that's where the sun rises. But in America, it's always about the West, and that's where the sun sets. And it does have a kind
always ending here. Everything's always ending here.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you something. Like I've always said, is like one of my favorite William S. Burroughs quotes. Yeah, he's a degenerate, but he always said that. So there's something inside of America that's evil, and he said the Indians knew it too. And it's interesting when you read the anthropology of Indians. Like we have this kind of a fantastical view of Indians in America. It's very boomer-esque. You know, everybody's got to be an Indian. Everybody's, you know, loves the Indians. But you know, if you read the history of like just where I'm from, we're in Indiana. Like how many the tribes? Like there was huge, like a huge Mississippian nation that lived here that are completely extinct, and it was like a few hundred years before the colonials came, like maybe 100 years or 50 years before the colonials came. And anthropologists kind of like don't really talk about it, but they kind of like think that there's probably a huge genocide that happened with these Indians that lived in this area. And that the people that lived here when the colonials got here were kind of newcomers that just murdered a bunch of people, you know, and just took over. And then throughout the colonials, they kept on doing it back and forth and taking it back over and over. So it's like there is something going on in America that is very cyclical like this.
Yeah, watch if you read the Peter Levenda's trilogy, he says that too, that the something that America has always been haunted, and that the Indians had this idea. And if you watch National Treasure 2, when Nick Cage discovers the secret of America, we just did a stream on this. So like he finds all these clues in the history of America, and it leads into this Indian cave out by Mount Rushmore. And deep down in this Indian cave is a giant ancient civilization of gold ziggurats, where it was a giant human sacrifice cult. So this is actually in the goofy National Treasure 2 Book of Secrets. The secret is that America was a giant human sacrifice cult at one time.
which is similar to what Frost was doing with the Twin Peaks books.
Yes, exactly. Great point. Great point.
We spoke about this topic briefly in our Great Satan episode, which happened at Meetup 1. Meetup 2 is happening soon, fellas, audience there.
Get ready for it.
Expect some good content to come out of that. I will record some of the stuff we have planned. Not all of it, obviously. Like 5 days. But it's going to be good stuff, guys. And I really want to kick up the RIB stuff by the end of this year, or the very early beginning of next year.
And you know, real quick, Rick, I want to comment, since we're on the American thing, and we've been talking a lot about Neo-Paganism. I also want to put forth another theory that I've had about evolution, Darwinian evolution, because it ties on the Neo-Pagan thing. It ties on to the Nietzschean thing that we were talking about, and it also ties into the Native American experience. Is the evolutionary model of the monkey being the totem of the modern culture? Is that what is the monkey? The monkey can freely have sex. The monkey uses tools. The monkey grooves together with the rest of the tribe. He's docile. He's not. He's the NPC.
Vic, if you're still awake.
Yeah,
Vic, you're still awake.
The monkey.
Oh, what's up?
The monkey.
Think of that freaking meme with Richard Dawkins. It's like, okay, so basically
A monkey.
Yeah. The monkey as a totem is the NPC. You see what I'm saying?
Ooh.
Yeah, I see. I'm catching on what you're saying. I just wanted real quick something I wanted to mention about the America being literal cursed soil. It seems that things here that are bad find a way to become worse. And when for example, I almost feel like it's some kind of sick joke. So like take malls, for example, right? They're like these hubs of consumerism, right? But at the very least, you're at least doing it with other people. You at least you go to the mall with your friends to engage in this act. But now malls are being closed down, and it's like it's really pitiful, and it's being replaced by like these online services like Amazon. Why would you go all the way out to a mall and have to socialize, which is so hard, guys? And when you can have a package, you can have basically anything delivered to your door in 3 days.
Yeah, you
And
just
it's like,
yeah. Because I know
click the button and forget about it, and like, oh yeah, the thing I ordered, here it is.
Dude,
yeah, it's like,
I totally know what you're talking about, because when Stranger Things 2 came out, they had like a thing for Stranger Thing 2 that was like a mall commercial, like I'd have when I was a kid. You guys probably don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I know
It would be
it's
advertised.
That's for 3, dude. That's for season 3.
Jesus, is that 3? Good God.
Yeah. It's a promo for season 3.
Yeah,
wait.
yeah, right. And so
There is?
so Vic,
I didn't see it.
It's a mall.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
it's like when I was when me and Jay were kids, you'd like go and you would go and see like who would be playing at the mall, who was the chick that would like some of the girl rock singers back in the
Like
80s.
Tiffany and that kind of
Tiffany,
shit.
you go see Tiffany at the mall. She'd be playing at the mall, like with like yeah.
When I was a teenager, and malls were still a thing, because I'm not that much younger than you guys. I'm 34. It was one time when I was like 18. We all got kicked out of the mall, Sunset Place Mall here in Miami. Shout out Sunset Place, guys. We got kicked out of the mall.
Shout out to the mall, dog. What's up, mall? How y'all doing?
Hot topic.
Shout out to all my mall niggas right here. They got Leroy, Babyface. Anyway, we got kicked out of the mall for loitering, and I being a mouthy ass 18-year-old, I told the guy, "What the hell is a mall for? Not the freaking loiter. What do you think? Why get in, get out of here? The whole place is geared to hang out. You have benches for people to sit, but then people sit in them, you kick them out."
You guys ever watch we're getting way off topic here, but the old
fuck topics, nigga.
the old movie the old movie Easy Money with Rodney Dangerfield and Joe Pesci. You ever watched that at all?
Mm-hmm.
No.
We're browsing here. We're browsing. Look at me, I'm browsing. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's
My favorite Ryan Dangerfield clip. My favorite clip from Dangerfield I like to use is the one where he's in the hat store in Caddyshack, in the golf store in Caddyshack.
Oh yeah.
He's like, "Oh yeah, I'll take one of those. Oh, look at this hat. It's the worst hat I ever saw. You buy a hat, these probably get a free bowl of soup." And this is the guy wearing the hat, and he goes, "Looks good on you, though."
When I lost hope in
school, that's my best. That's the best running.
The joke I have with that scene is that hat is the Byzantine Rite, and Ryan Dangerfield is Roman Catholic Church. The guy wearing the hat is Byzantine Catholics. So like the Roman Catholic would be like, "It's just so stupid and heretical." But then like, well, how about these Bizcasts? Oh, it's fine if you do it though.
The meta meme. Oh my god, that
looks good on you.
Multiple levels.
Looks good on you though. It's fine for you guys.
I remember when I first lost hope in humanity the first time was when Rodney Dangerfield died, and I used to read these musical magazines from like England, because back when there were, before the internet, you read magazines, and they had a little blurb about for Rodney Dangerfield's obituary, and it said, "Rodney Dangerfield, huge hit in America, hardly made a blurb in England, has died." And I was like, "You haven't heard of Rodney Dangerfield, you poor bastards."
How
did you not know who he is?
You know what? That obituary is worthy of Rodney Dangerfield. That's an obituary he would laugh his ass off at. Like, "This guy was great in America. Hardly made a blurb in England. Oh, give him respect."
Well, and this is I'll go back to this, is that the Gen X and the millennials were raised in comedy. Like, there's a dualistic part of us. That there's a major part that's funny. There's a major part that's like horribly nihilistic with our music and things like that. And a lot of our movies were very nihilistic. But there was a huge humor part of it, and the humor parts came from stand-up comedy, and it came from skit comedy. And the real incubator of the stand-up comedy that came out of the 80s and 90s that I grew up in my era came from Rodney Dangerfield's club. All of the greats came from Dangerfield's club. Everyone that you would know, still to this day, as being a great comedic legend as far as stand-up goes, they earned their stripes through Dangerfield's Club.
I've been there. It's a neat place.
Oh yeah.
Oh really? That's awesome, man.
Yeah, that my first time I did stand up, I was it was my senior trip. I went to New York for a week-long thing and auditioned in a couple clubs, but I didn't do stand up at Dangerfield's. But the night that I arrived, we went to see a show at Dangerfield's, and it was pretty neat, really intimate setting, but it was very cool to be there.
Do you remember who was even there?
The only one that I remember was a woman who she did a bit about getting a transfusion from a pig, because that was in the news that somebody got a transfusion of a pig heart, that it worked. And so her whole shtick was that in the middle of telling the story, she started snorting like a pig. I mean, but no, it wasn't anybody famous there the night that I was there.
A slight chuckle emits.
Yeah. I remember I talked to her afterwards because she was like super Jewish chick, and I was like, I want to do stand up, and she was like, follow your heart. You've got to follow your heart. That's the only thing to do it in the stand up thing is follow your heart.
And please make sure you support Israel in all her decisions.
And have a good trust fund. Yeah,
it was a cool club though. It was a real. It's like you think these things are going to be big, but it was like a really kind of intimate, small. Everything in New York, everything's really small because it's like these little boxes where every restaurant, every place is like a little box.
I've been to one. I've been to exactly one comedy club, and I was made supremely uncomfortable because the comedian at the stage started making jokes. Okay, he has a daughter that's like less than a year old at the time. And he's changing her, and all he can talk about is sex jokes with his infant daughter.
Oh my god!
I was like, I can't handle this. I gotta get the fucking hell out of this club right now. I cannot stomach this joke.
Yeah, it's pretty gross because they all try to do that stuff. I went to a stand-up thing actually about 3 weeks ago, and I actually knew the stand-up. I was trying to get him to come on the podcast, but he wouldn't do it. But I will say, in their defense, like the three, he was the best of the three. The other two openers were just the pits. But I have to give them credit because they didn't get nasty. So it wasn't like disgusting, pedo jokes like you hear all the time now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
but it was boomer tier, like off, just boomer comedy out the butt, dude. It was the pits.
Just the shock value thing. They still try to grab a hold of that. As if like we're not 50 years past Piss Christ, George Carlin, or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we've already been shocked enough.
Why did they tell you to get on the plane when you get in the plane? Shut the hell up, George. We know what you fucking mean. Get on the plane.
It's like modern women comedians for some reason have went to the Attell school of comedy. It's like they just traded all the dick jokes with their vaginas. You know what I mean? It's just like
yeah.
It gets brutal to
female
listen
comedian here. Did I tell you about my vagina yet? Because vagina.
Did you guys see my stream? I did like 2 hours going off on female comedians, and I showed from I showed from 5 different ones. It's the same routine.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I know. I didn't see that one. What's that?
Say what?
Which one was that? I must have missed that one.
I must have missed that one too.
Let me think what I titled it. I titled it "Feminist Comedians Roasted." If you search that in my name, it'll come up. And basically, what I did was at the beginning of the stream, I was like, "All right, here's the premise. We're going to see if each one of these comedians hits the so-called hits comedian hit the 5,
Comedian.
The chocolate, the weight, the sex, the mom, the PMS, basically, I think is the 5. And literally they all hit it. Like they all it was like clock work, dude. They was boom, 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 boom.
And all male comedians will really good male comedians will all say the same thing, is that women just aren't funny. You know what I mean? But I do want to take a quick round since we're all here and we all are huge comedy fans. Do you have a favorite female comedian that actually that you feel like is a really good comedian?
Yes, I will say there are a couple of funny girls. I think Anna Faris is funny. I think Kristen Wiig is funny, or can be.
Dude,
I'm about out, so I can't think of many more.
Bamford. Maria Bamford.
Who is she?
Oh, bro, but only because she's like, she has some sort of mental problem.
Maria
But
Bamford.
she's not like, not like regular girls. It's like, I guess every girl would tell you, but she really is not like regular girls. She's like bizarre, kind of disjointed personality.
Sorry, go ahead.
She was even committed for a time.
Wow.
So, but yeah, she's really bizarre, but her comedy is really hilarious. Maria Bamford.
Okay.
I'll check her out. Yeah.
She's actually
that Arab chick that does the cut downs is pretty good. Have you seen her on the roasts?
no, I have not.
It's some Arab chick. I can't forget her name, but she's pretty good at the roasts. But
I am way behind on the comedy stuff.
Well, I gotta
Not
say,
much
I like a lot of the women that came out of the 70s and 80s, of course, just because there's something that about them that where they were kind of a more supportive or whatever. I always enjoyed Catherine O'Hara a lot.
yeah, the older SNL people, yeah, there's some funny ones there. Yeah.
But now it's just so difficult. It's just really is. It's really just getting about, just these really obscene, just shock value.
It's very
liberal
political and it's very cult like, and you have to go along with these, Amy Schumer, Liz Winstead, abortion. If you're not on the board with that, you're not going to get any promotion.
Hey guys, yada. My vagina, my dead fetus ghost haunting it. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, same shit.
Disgusting, yeah.
Gross, repulsive. But
I think it's funny how like a lot of male comedians will push the envelope so far, and they'll pick on the low hanging fruit. Like Bill Burr is one of those guys. It's like signal, kind of feminism and certain like the PC things that are like easy to kind of touch on. Then they'll kind of run away afterwards. You know what I mean?
Soft ass little bitch, man. I'll say this. This is a conflict I had with the wife. Dude, I completely forget it. I was my train of thought. My train of thought completely derailed. Forget it.
I do that to people.
God, awful. Okay. Damn, I hate that.
Just all eyes on you, dude. There's
Clear
like 1,000 people watching.
train of thought and just complete fizzles out into nothing in front of you.
If it makes you feel any better, there's like 1,000 people watching right now.
That's fine. Oh, fuck him. He's an ungrateful swine. He's 64 watching right now.
Well, let's go to the round table again. Okay, so let's say, hands down, who's your favorite stand-up comedian ever?
I gotta say,
We always do a top 5 with Jay, don't we? We always do.
yes. Last time we did the movie.
I can't pick a number one, but I can list the ones I like. Okay, so
Yeah, let's do a top 5.
I'll say I do like Mitch Hedberg. I like Jerry Seinfeld as a stand-up. I like
Rip in peace, Hedberg.
I like Andy Kaufman's wacky style. That's who influences me. That's about it. I mean, I'm not. The older I get, the less I like stand-up, and the more I like sketch comedy and improv. As odd as that may seem. And I think that's because they've killed stand-up. Stand-up is not, it's so political that it's not funny anymore.
Oh, guys,
Censored.
I was trying to outro, but we need to do a quick little tangent, little segue onto the Kaufman Jim Carrey question, because that is bizarre.
That would be a good one for Jay. That is a good one for Jay because we talked about this a million times.
Because did you watch the documentary on Netflix with Jim Carrey talking about the Andy Kaufman thing?
No, I mean I watched Man on the Moon like back when it came out.
No, there's a documentary about Man on the Moon with Jim Carrey.
Okay, no, I haven't seen that.
Oh my
Dude,
God, you gotta watch it.
Okay, Jay, you gotta watch it. It is like a case study in pre-list.
Yeah, disassociation. I mean,
Okay.
What do you mean?
As someone, I come from a literature background. That's what I studied in college. That's what I write
me too.
fiction
Yeah.
in my spare time. This is what the way my brain works. So I tend to build narratives out of things that maybe are not there. But I definitely built a narrative out of this documentary, and it's like, okay, if I were a demon who liked fame and fortune, and I had a great run with Andy Kaufman, he died. How can I get back up on this thing? I gotta make someone make it. Okay, you have to fucking watch it because Jim Carrey's entire modus operandi in kind of reanimating this.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that, Rick. Talk about
this Andy Kaufman character because he doesn't really animate Andy Kaufman because the people who knew Andy Kaufman were like, actually, he was nothing like this. What are you doing?
But he would refuse. Jay, he would refuse to come out of the role. So Jim Carrey, when he was on Man of the Moon, when he went back to the trailer, he was still Andy Kaufman, right?
Right, method acting. Right.
If he couldn't get the makeup done for the roles, he would put a paper bag over his head and still pretend to be the person. And it became a thing where he couldn't control what he was being anymore. And the way he was describing it sounded like how the church fathers and the saints describe demonic possession. That's all I'm like.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, this is So dissociative states and another entity, stepping in and taking over. This has always been in the arts and including acting and comedy. Yeah.
This is pure Jay's analysis content. You have to watch the documentary.
Okay. Well, have you guys seen Robin Williams when he used to go on his sort of improv like spouts? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, sure.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so I just took we did a Warner Brothers studio tour when I was in LA and out there to speak, and they were telling stories about the comedians, and they were saying that when they would film, I think Mork and Mindy, they would say that, or one of the shows that Robin Williams was in, they were worried about the take, and then so if the take didn't go right, Robin Williams would go on these crazy improv rants, and then they would be like, "Oh, we didn't get that right. Can you do it again?" And he'd be like, "I don't know what I said. I don't know."
Right.
Wow.
Whoa.
Holy crap. Yeah.
I'm going to bring it to a different level with Jim Carrey real quick with you, Jay, because I think this is kind of important too. Because I've also watched these other documentary or these other interviews with Jim Carrey, and he's taken on this kind of Gurdjieffian philosophy.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And it's a kind of a disassociation.
You don't exist, man. You're just a figment of your own imagination, man.
Yeah. Right. He was
not
doing a
real,
bunch
I'm
of
not
drugs, and he was tripping out.
And so I was wondering. I was talking to Rick about this. Like, okay, so he's getting into this Gurdjieffian philosophy. Like he's trying to disassociate himself with the rest of the world. And then Rick had a really good take on it. And Rick, go ahead and you explained kind of the psychology of why.
Dude, okay. He gave his ex-girlfriend some sort of sexually transmitted disease, and she died. She killed herself. She committed suicide, and in her suicide, she blamed him specifically. And her ex-boyfriend, who she left to be with Jim Carrey, backed it up. He's like, yes, she changed. She stopped being who she was. Awful things, like truly awful things. They say that you don't look at and be unchanged by. And it was tragic. It was tragic. I never say suicide is anything but tragic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tragic event. It's not something to be lampooned or to be like clapped for. Oh, she's so brave. And there's a lot of right now, in my opinion, in the culture, there's a lot of aggrandizing of the suicidal motive. It's gross and it's out there. But
of course, Jim Carrey would disassociate. Try to say that there's
he's saying no, this is true. That this happened. Like, dude, she's saying, she's laying out specifically what happened.
So disassociate myself with myself. There's nothing but personalities, and all of our personality is some kind of
out of the guilt,
impressions that other people
out of the guilt of this. of this event, out of the guilt of this event that what he was responsible for, he starts laying out this theory like, oh, well, we're not really people, or we're not really real individuals. Oh, we're just like these figments of our own imaginations. But then, like, who's imagining it, right? Idiot, stupid, fucking bullshit. But it's, dude, you have to fucking watch the documentary.
Okay, I will watch that.
And the entire time you're watching it, keep in mind that this guy drove his girlfriend to kill herself, and she blamed him, and he's trying to escape from his own self.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so in other words, a flight from guilt and then repressing that, which is interesting because he's the main character in the movie The Number 23, who has an alternate persona who suppresses his guilt.
Exactly.
And also Internal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh yes,
constant theme. And
recreating of your own memory, recreating of your own being. And then on top of that, of course, now he's a huge NPC liberal that makes art against Trump and puts all these liberal talking points in.
By the way, also too, the story of Andy Kaufman is similar to that as well. There's speculation that Andy Kaufman was kind of starting to dissociate too towards
dude. Yeah. Okay, I'm like 85% convinced that this is like. This is like like the back like atheist part of my brain is still in there. Says this is stupid, but like looking at this whole thing, it feels like if there was a demon addicted to the Hollywood spotlight, and he wanted another go at it, and so he did the same shtick that he knows how to do in someone else.
And I would go further beyond Andy Kaufman, and I would say that like Peter Sellers develops the same type of
being there
personality. And I think he tried to speak it to his movie. What was his final movie that he did? It was very much about this. The same Gurdjieffian concept. It's the same exact thing of an atomized a man that lies behind the man. And it's very cultish. So, and that's the thing about Gurdjieff and all these other things is that if you can convince somebody that their whole world is impressions, that their whole personality is just something they've mimicked off other people, and there's another person behind them, then you get the raw material. Then you can kind of reform that to whatever you want to. I think that's kind of an essence of neo-paganism to kind of cycle back to what we're saying. I think this is kind of a lot of what the shamans were doing,
right,
and still do to this day. They still we're going to bring you back. There is the person that you know is nothing but what your father taught you. You walked like your dad did, and you talked like your dad did, and you developed all these impressions. You got to let go of all those impressions,
dude.
And I'm really a person.
Like Rabbi Zacharias, who's an evangelical. I respect. I listen to him. He's a great guy. He spoke about this a lot. That evolutionists want to say that hey, your psyche is no different than that of animals. And now, further modernity says actually, it's also no different than that of machines. It's a great joke he has. And I think guys, if you're okay with it, we'll outro on this joke.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
This really funny joke. That he has okay. No pressure. Hey, look at respect. The joke is that he has there's a guy. He's looking for a job. Here's a job from a zoo. He calls a zoo. He's like, hey, you got this job waiting for me? Like, yeah, we have a shortage of chimps. Can you come and do a job interview with us? And he comes there to do a job interview. Okay, you have an history in acting. Can you put on a chimp costume for us and just pretend to be a chimp 8 hours a day? And then at the end of the day, you go in the cave, you change your regular clothes, except the secret backpack we have. Can you do that for us, guys? Can you do it, please? And he goes, okay, with this pay, I'll do it. Sure, cool. That sounds good to me. So he's there being a chimp swinging branch to branch. He's like, I'm so tired, swinging around all day. One day he swings too hard, swings into the lion's cage, falls down. He starts screaming, "Someone help me! Help me, please! I'm not." And the lion comes up to him, and before he can scream, the lion goes, "Shh! You don't shut up. We'll both lose our jobs."
Fantastic. Oh, that's class. That's good old man joke right there. That's good.
And that's a Ravi Zacharias joke.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
He's a guy who was evangelical, so I got my problems with him, but overall,
I know who he is. Yeah.
I love his shtick. He's fantastic. He's great. I love him. I pray for his him to convert to freaking Orthodoxy. Like I'll do with all the other evangelicals I know in my freaking life. Oh boy, I got my little prayer list full. Kidding me?
All right, dude. Well, thanks, you guys. It was always a pleasure. I appreciate having me back. It was a great talk.
Yeah. Definitely support jaysanalysis.com.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
You guys are just so connected to your wallets. Look at Trump and look what Trump did. You don't have to agree with Trump. You don't have to disagree with Trump. But he has taken over the Republican Party just through private donations. And he's reinventing the whole party just through that. So, guys, your money does count. It doesn't cost much. Just sacrifice a couple bags of Cheetos a week or a month. That's all it takes. A couple bags of Cheetos, guys.
It's kind of asking a lot.
Here or there. That's all we're asking. That's all I got, guys.
Guys,
I'll post this and I'll link you guys as well. And God bless, and everybody have a good night.
Absolutely.
And let's not wait so long this next time.
Yes, yeah. People calling it a reunited, like I never hang out with my J man over here, but we absolutely do. Jay, please stay on for a little bit after we disconnect the broadcast. Make sure to share a little bit.
Okay.
God bless you all,
guys. Go to church on Sunday, not tomorrow, because my days are always mixed up. I don't know what day it is. Have a time. I gotta wake up.
Go to Vespers tomorrow.
Yeah, go to Vespers.
There
Find a
you
local
go.
church. Make sure check it at God Vespers. Go to it. If not, stay home and pray. Pray for us. Pray for Jay. Pray for my wife. All that stuff. All right, guys. Have a good night.